The story of Ben Askren has always been a little different, from his days as a dominant wrestler to his transition into mixed martial arts, from being an undefeated Bellator and ONE FC champion to his turbulent UFC run to his viral knockout at the hands of Jorge Masvidal. Askren has rarely taken a conventional path, but even for a man accustomed to unexpected twists, nothing could have prepared him more the MMA community for the reality of undergoing a double lung transplant. Now, months after the life-saving surgery, Askren is finally opening up about the painful journey, the emotional toll, and the unlikely motivation he's found watching fighters like Pereira and Khamza rise in the UFC. His words are not only deeply personal, they're a window into the human side of a sport too often defined by toughness alone. It started quietly. Askren, who had been retired for some time following a hip replacement and persistent injuries, was living a relatively private life with his family, coaching, wrestling, fasting, and staying connected to the MMA world from a distance. But something wasn't right. He was short of breath doing basic things. Walking upstairs became a challenge. His voice weakened. His weight dropped. Initially dismissive, he chalked it up to aging, scar tissue from years of competition, maybe even long COVID, but the symptoms worsened. Then came the diagnosis: chronic lung damage. Years of inflammation and undiagnosed respiratory trauma had deteriorated his lungs to the point where his body was slowly suffocating itself. Doctors offered few options. Medication might prolong things for a year or two, but ultimately, the only chance of survival was a double lung transplant, a procedure so radical, so life-altering, that it stunned even Askren into silence. "I didn't know what to think," he admitted. "I always thought my body would fail me in the knees, or the back, or the brain, but lungs, that was never on the radar." The transplant journey is long, brutal, and filled with uncertainty. First came the wait months of being on the donor list, checking into the hospital at all hours for tests, hoping but not knowing. Then came the fear, not of dying necessarily. Askren had made peace with mortality through years of competition, but the fear of living trapped inside a body that no longer responded, of watching his children grow up without the energy to play with them, of becoming a ghost of himself, that was harder. When the call finally came, it was the middle of the night. They said, "We found a match," and everything became real in an instant. The surgery lasted over 10 hours. The recovery was a different kind of fight, one he wasn't prepared for. People think a fighter is tough because they get punched in the face. That's nothing compared to waking up with two lungs that aren't yours and trying to breathe like it's normal. Askren couldn't walk. He couldn't sit upright. He was on machines, tubes, medications that distorted his sense of time and self. "I would have moments where I didn't know if I was alive, and other moments where I wished I wasn't," he says, without drama, just honesty. His family was there. His wife, silent and strong. His kids, confused but brave. His teammates, calling and texting. But it was a lonely fight. No coach can prepare you for this. There's no game plan, no corner advice, just pain and survival. He lost 35 pounds in the first 3 weeks. Food tasted like chemicals. Dreams bled into reality. One night he hallucinated that he was back in the cage with Demi and Maya. Only this time, they weren't fighting, they were both drowning. He woke up gasping, hands clawing at the air, heart monitor screaming. But slowly, piece by piece, he began to recover. First, a breath without pain, then a step, then 10, a walk down the hall, a smile from a nurse, a meal that didn't make him vomit, and somewhere in that darkness, he found purpose. "I didn't want my kids to see me as a man who gave up. I didn't want my students to think a wrestler taps out when things get hard. So I kept pushing." In the quiet hours of rehab, Askren turned to MMA, again not physically, but mentally. He watched fights obsessively, not out of nostalgia, but as a way to stay connected. When your body betrays you, your mind becomes your gym. He studied tape, broke down matchups in his head, tweeted from bed, and reignited his commentary instincts. And two fighters stood out to him more than any other: Pereira and Khamza. "They're fascinating," he says. "Pereira is a killer. No wasted motion, no emotion, just pure precision and timing. And then there's Khamza, explosive, reckless, but calculated. They're like fire and ice. Watching them gave me energy. It gave me something to look forward to." Askren has never been shy with opinions, and his takes on both fighters are nuanced. Pereira's rise is unlike anything I've seen. He skips the line, comes in with this incredible kickboxing pedigree, and just starts knocking off champions. His poise is unreal, but people underestimate how smart he is. Everyone talks about his power, but his setups, his distance management, it's masterful. He reminds me a little of Lyoto Machida, but with way more menace. As for Chimaev, is more cautious but still impressed. Khamza is a beast, no question, but he's chaos. That can be a strength, but it can also be his undoing. He overwhelms guys, drowns them. But what happens when he meets someone who doesn't panic? Someone who weathers the storm and pushes back. Askren reflects on his own fight with Maya. How grappling exchanges can sap the soul out of fighters who aren't used to resistance. That's where the real test for Khamza will be. Not in whether he can dominate, but what happens when he can't. He believes both fighters are on a collision course. It's inevitable. Pereira might move to heavyweight eventually, but I think we see Khamza versus Pereira at 205 first. And when that happens, it's going to be insane. Askren has no illusions about returning to fighting. The transplant changed everything. His body, while healing, is now dependent on anti-rejection drugs, regular scans, and a careful lifestyle. I'm not fighting again. That part of my story is done. And that's okay. I don't need to prove anything anymore. But he is planning to return to the MMA scene in a different way. He's launching a foundation for fighter healthcare, partnering with other former athletes who suffered post-career issues, both physical and mental. This sport chews people up. It's time we talk about that more openly. Fighters are warriors, but they're also humans, and we need to support them after the lights go off. He's also returning to podcasting and analysis, with a new series called Rebuilt, chronicling his recovery and offering deep dives into fighters' stories, techniques, and personal lives. I want to tell the stories that get lost, the real ones, not just who won the belt, but who lost everything chasing it. Askren remains critical of certain aspects of the UFC business model. The pay structure still sucks. The healthcare is minimal. Fighters don't get residuals, and when you're out, you're out. It's like being kicked off a cliff. But he also credits Dana White and the UFC for building the platform that made global stardom possible. Without the UFC, nobody knows who I am. I can critique and appreciate at the same time. The MMA community has responded to his openness with unexpected warmth. Tweets from fighters like Dustin Poirier, Chael Sonnen, and even Masvidal poured in. "Stay strong, Funky," Masvidal tweeted. "We go to war in that cage, but I respect any man who fights the way you do, even when it's not in the octagon." Askren smiled reading that. Life has a way of humbling all of us, and sometimes it brings us together in ways we never imagined. Now, as he continues to rebuild his strength, relearn his body, and rediscover his voice, Ben Askren is more than a retired fighter. He is a survivor, a teacher, a storyteller, and, maybe, in his own way, a champion once again, because there's something undeniably powerful about a man who has been through hell and chooses to share the journey. Not for pity, not for clout, but to remind others that even when the air leaves your lungs, the fire doesn't have to. He still watches every UFC card. He still breaks down wrestling technique like a professor. He still rolls with his students carefully, but joyfully. And he still gets emotional watching warriors like Pereira stand calm in the fire, or Chimaev unleash fury with every step. "Fighting taught me everything," Askren says, "but losing it all taught me even more." And so, as the sport continues to evolve, with new faces rising, new champions being crowned, and new rivalries being born, the voice of Ben Askren remains a little slower, a little softer, but still sharp, still fearless, still here. His body may never return to what it was, but his spirit, stronger than ever.